Hello and welcome back to another Dare to Game video. Today we're playing Mount & Blade Bannerlord, specifically the Napoleonic Warfare Conversion Mod, and we're going to be going through some of the different uniforms for the French faction. So in this mod, the Empire has been kind of soft replaced with the French from the Napoleonic Era, and they're probably the most well fleshed out faction in the game, so that's why I decided to start with them, even though they're not the first faction I chose to play as. So we're going to be going through just all of the distinct uniforms or armor options, whatever you want to call them. I would call them uniforms, but outfits that have been added to the mod for the French faction. Like I said, I think this one has the most variety. I haven't fully explored every faction yet. This is my second faction that I've really dug into and figured out as much about it as I can in the mod. So yeah, we're just going to go through them. I don't have any particular order for these. There are certain ones that I like more than others, but I'm not putting them in that order. And there's some guesswork involved. So if you know much about Mount & Blade, you know that their suits of armor, or in this case uniforms or outfits, are made up of several different pieces. So not every single one of these outfits will have a named piece that corresponds with that slot. When it doesn't, I will just go off what looks best with the uniform and or what goes best with it. So if it's a specific type of cavalry and they don't have the right sash for that or something, I will just use the cavalry sash or whatever. So I hope that that all makes sense. Let's just dive into it and go through all of these different uniforms. So our first uniform we're going to be looking at is the French Dragoon uniform, and so this one is pretty dang cool. I like this one. It's very unique, stands out really well, and is relatively easy to assemble part-wise because most of them are named. So this one is made up of the French Dragoon helmet, a cavalry bandolier since they don't have a specific Dragoon bandolier, a French Dragoon uniform, the officer's gloves black just because color-wise it seems to go with the uniform the best, and then French infantry gaiters. Interestingly, the French faction, despite having a lot of options for the torso slot, has very few options for the legs and no cavalry options, so I just chose the ones that looked the best color-wise with the Dragoon uniform. So that is our first French uniform. Our second French uniform is the French Grenadier uniform, and now this is just a regular grenadier, not an officer. This uniform is made up of the following pieces: the French Grenadier shako, the French equipment, the French Grenadier uniform, the officer's gloves wool or no gloves, and the French infantry gaiters. So this one again looks pretty dang cool. I really like the way it looks, and it not too hard to figure out. So that is the Grenadier uniform. Next up we have the French Guard, and now this one looks pretty unique. I love the hat for this one. So this uniform is made up of the French Guard bearskin, the French equipment Guard, the French Guard uniform, officer's gloves wool, and the French Guard gaiters. So again, very unique and cool looking. I love the hat on this one. Gives you that real unique vibe to it. Real old guard sentiment at Waterloo. Love it. Next up we have the French Hussar. So this is a light cavalry skirmisher type troop that was very common at the time. So it's a Hussar, obviously. This uniform is made up of the French Hussar shako, the French Hussar equipment, the French Hussar uniform, the officer's gloves black, and the French infantry. So altogether looking pretty dang good. I really like this one. The brown and blue accents actually look really cool. Weirdly so, considering normally I wouldn't pair those colors together. But yes, that is the French Hussar. Next up we have the French infantry uniform. So this one is the real basic infantry unit. So therefore it looks quite basic, but still good. This one's made up of the French line shako, the infantry bandolier, the French infantry uniform, the officer's gloves wool or no gloves if you so choose, and the French infantry gaiters. So very basic looking, but I still think quite cool. Obviously, the weapons that I have paired with these are not switching. You would not have a flintlock pistol with this. You would most likely have a musket. But yes, that is the French infantry uniform. Next up, we have one that's a little bit hit or miss. Kind of hard to tell if it's the right direction to go with it, but is the French recruit uniform. So for this one, I actually decided, since there isn't a designated hat that I was able to find with it, I guess you could go with the line shako that I used for the last one, but I decided to go with a tricorn hat, since, just across the board in many nations, the tricorn was a very popular hat style at the time, and so it would make sense that a recruit coming in might have one. Then I went with the standard French equipment, the French recruit uniform, the officer's gloves wool, which it might make more sense to go with no gloves, but if Napoleon had better winter equipment in Russia, everything would have went better, so we're just going to give everyone gloves. And then the French infantry gaiters, since they're the most basic pants that you can get. Really looks pretty good. I actually like the tricorn. It's very different than most French uniforms because obviously the shako was the military hat most worn by French troops in the Napoleonic era, but that being said, still looks cool and it differentiates them from the regular infantry. So that's the French recruit. Our next uniform is the French Vistula uniform, just the enlisted. This is not an officer's uniform. So again, looks pretty cool. This one's made up of the French Vistula shako, the infantry bandolier, the French Vistula uniform, the officer's gloves white, and the French infantry boots. So all pretty solid. This one leans more into the yellow accents, but again, looks quite cool. Next up, we have the French Voltigeur uniform, and this one, now if my memory is correct, the Voltigeurs were a French skirmisher troop, and I think sometimes doubled as fusiliers, so I'm not 100% certain about that, but that's kind of where my memory takes me with the Voltigeur. But this uniform is made up of the French Voltigeur shako, the infantry bandolier, the French Voltigeur uniform, the officer's gloves black, and the French Voltigeur gaiters. So I actually like this one. It's one of the better put together uniforms in the French faction, the Voltigeur uniforms, that being said. Just they're polished, they look good, there's no clipping or any weird texture issues with them, so this one's quite cool. Next up, we have our first of the officers' uniforms, that being the French Grenadier officer. So again, quite cool looking, and like all the officers' uniforms, going to be a little bit more flashy than the enlisted ones that we've looked at, and you know, so therefore most people are probably going to like them a little bit more. This one's made up of the French Grenadier officer's shako, the cavalry bandolier. You could also use infantry, but for most of the officers I have them mounted, or you know, find them to be mounted units, and so therefore I will off just give them the cavalry bandolier because it, you know, covers less of the uniform. But that being said, infantry is more accurate for a lot of them. The French Grenadier officer uniform, the officer's gloves white, and the French infantry boots. So again, start to get into the fancier, more sharp looking uniforms. Next up, we have the French Guard officer. So this is the officer variant of the Guard uniform. It's made up of the French Guard officer bearskin, the infantry bandolier, the French Guard officer uniform, the officer's gloves white, and the French infantry boots. So pretty cool. Like I said, just a flashier version of the Guard uniform. Our next uniform is the French infantry officer, so the officer variant of the infantry uniform. Hopefully you're sensing a pattern here. We have the French line officer shako, the infantry bandolier, the French infantry officer uniform, the officer gloves wool, and the French infantry gaiters. And now the thing that you might notice with a bunch of these officer variant uniforms is the epaulets. On a whole bunch of them, the right shoulder epaulet doesn't have the little tassel, which I'm pretty sure is not intentional. It looks like a glitch. If it's not, it doesn't look good, but that is what a bunch of them will have. Other than that, I still really like these uniforms, and this one is a little bit more subdued in its colors, but I still really like. So that is the French infantry officer. Our next uniform is the French Vistula officer, and now I don't think I said this before with the Vistulas, but interestingly, and again, just going off memory here, I believe the Vistula unit or regiment or whatever they were in the Napoleonic War were a French army unit, but they were made up of Polish troops. So I believe the Vistula troops were Polish troops in the French army, and so this is their officer. This uniform is made up of the French Vistula officer shako, the infantry bandolier, the French Vistula officer uniform, the officer gloves wool, and the French infantry gaiters. So again, quite cool. Next uniform is going to be the Voltigeur officer. So it's just, you know, kind of like the same as the regular Voltigeur uniform. A couple accents are different colored, but other than that, it looks pretty much the same. And likewise, I really like it. So this one is made up of the French Voltigeur officer shako, the cavalry bandolier, or infantry if you want to, the French Voltigeur officer uniform, the officer's gloves black, and the French Voltigeur gaiters. So again, all blue uniform, looks really cool. I actually prefer this one because the epaulets and tassels on the shoulder, they actually both exist and they're not all glitched out on the right shoulder, which is obviously great and makes it a lot better than a lot of the other French officer uniforms. And I actually like the silver better than the green, which is weird for me because I love the color green. I just don't love it as an accent for blue. But yes, that's the French Voltigeur officer. Our next one is the French Young Guard officer uniform, and now I would assume that they are referencing just a distinguishment between the Old Guard and the Young Guard, that being different eras of troops and not specifically the age of the units. But that being said, this one is made up of the French Young Guard officer shako, the French Equipment Guard, the French Young Guard officer uniform, the officer's gloves wool, and the French Guard gaiters. I really like this one. I think it's got a lot going on, but the epaulets actually work, so it's a good uniform for that, and the colors are very sharp and vibrant, and I actually really like the extra gold accents on the shako and the Imperial Eagle. Very cool. So yeah, this one's a very neat uniform. It's one of my favorites in the game. I actually wear a sort of souped up, more officery looking version of it for my main player character. But yes, that is the French Young Guards officer. Next up, we have one of our most unique looking uniforms in the game as a whole, and it is the French Carabiner uniform. And this one is some of the better armor armor in the game stat-wise. So I've definitely wore elements of this one quite a bit. So this one is made up of the French carabiner helmet, the cavalry bandolier. I don't like how it clips, but you don't want to miss out on the extra armor value for it. Then we have the French carabiner cuirass for the body armor, the officer's gloves white, and the French infantry boots. And now again, you'd think there would be cavalry boots for a uniform like this, but that being said, looks really cool. I love the white with the light blue accents, and then of course the gold torso armor and matching helmet. It looks really, really cool. So I actually genuinely enjoy the carabiner uniform and think that it's one of the better looking ones in the entire game as a whole. Definitely stands out for all of the French uniforms. And for our final uniform, we have the French cuirassier uniform. So this one is sort of a souped up dragoon kind of looking like, because it's got a lot of similar design elements. And as far as the cavalry, which they are a cavalry unit, they serve a similar purpose. Obviously the dragoons are lightly armored, or much lighter. They don't typically have a breastplate like the cuirassiers do, but they serve a similar role other than that. So this uniform is made up of the French cuirassier helmet. I have a cavalry bandolier on there, but you don't need to, because it already has a strap across it, but I like having my slots filled, giggity. Then we have a French cuirassier cuirass, try saying that 10 times fast, and the officer's gloves white, and the French infantry boots. So again, that is a definitely heavier looking armor, but it's quite fancy. I think that the design elements are all done very, very well, and if you're planning on playing as a heavy cavalry type playthrough where you're not specifically going to be shooting nearly as much, you're probably going to want to be using your sword a lot more, then this is definitely a way to go for a French player. But yes, that is the final uniform. So like I said, the French faction in this game has a lot of uniforms. Me personally, I'm rocking that Napoleon look, which should go without saying considering the fact that I am playing as Napoleon. But you can go a lot of ways with the French uniforms, and like I said, I plan to really get in depth with the Russian, the Prussian, the Austrian, the Italian, and then I think there's, well, obviously the British, but I've already looked a lot into them. I just haven't made a video yet. They'll probably be the next video I do. And I think there's one more faction, but you know, there's quite a few things that have been added into this mod, and I plan to go through all of them. But I wanted to start with the French because I think they've been fleshed out the best in this mod, and obviously the French are flamboyant with their fashion senses, so their uniforms definitely have a lot going on. But that's it. That's all of them. Hope you enjoyed this video, but we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching another Dare to Game video. If you liked this video, please leave a like and a comment. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the channel. If you like my content and would like to support this channel, consider becoming a member today for as little as $1.99 a month. It makes a huge difference. But in any case, thanks for watching and have a nice day. I'll see you next time.